The next presentation is going to be by Mr. Femi Oluwafemi Ruiz. Mr. Femi Ruiz is an IT professional, self-taught web developer, author, and missional entrepreneur. After graduating as a civil engineer, he founded Basilia Innovative Solutions, an IT company that focuses on providing simple, affordable innovations to identify problems in high-impact industries of the African economy. In 2014, he co-founded Manage Soft and committed his time to training young executives and professionals on organizational computing and database management. Femi has spent years researching, developing, and experimenting practical models to integrate entrepreneurial and information technology as critical components of driving holistic change. As a writer, his articles have been featured in several journals and online publications, and he has authored several books, including Make Yourself an Asset to Earth, Mom, It's Just a Dollar, and Three Apes and a Recession. Is something wrong with our economy or is something wrong with us? He currently serves as the head of research and implementation at BIS, that is Basilia Innovative Solutions. We're glad and excited to have Mr. Femi in the house. Mr. Femi, are you there? Let me unmute you right away. Just be patient with me. Let me do that. And also give you the opportunity to take over. Okay, Mr. Femi, over to you. You can unmute yourself, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Shion. Yeah. Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you very well.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And thank you for having me here at the leadership training. I see this as a leadership training, right?
Yes.
Because even though this is a youth forum, it is more or less youths who are leaders in one regard or the other. So this is a leadership training, and thank you for having me here to train these wonderful people today. Please, will you pardon do I have permission to share?
Yes, you do.
Okay, you pardon my lighting is not so good. Just as I was preparing for this class, like they say, NEPA took light. And you see, we are talking about identifying and solving problems today. And it is sad that this is a problem that has been lingering with us as a nation for years. And I want to believe that in this class are people who will solve some of these issues that have been with us as a nation for many years. So can you see my screen? Let me turn off my video.
Yes, we can. No, I think the video is good.
Let me do without it. I want everyone to focus on the points I'm presenting here.
Okay.
Yes. So identifying and solving problems. The learning outcome from this is, first of all, participants are going to understand the basic concept of identifying problems. Sorry, that's not process. Problems, of identifying problems, right? And apply this concept to real life situations. This is just a 40-45 minutes training, so we can't go into details here, but just understand the basic and the general concept of identifying problems and apply this concept to real life situations. So let's get down to business. A few opening thoughts now. In life, you'll be remembered for either the problems you created or the problems you solved. I want you to note that. That's very important. In life, you'll be remembered for either the problems you created or the problems you solved. Those are the two things you'll be remembered for in life. If I start calling the names of famous people who have died, you would see that you remember them for either the problems they created or the problems they solved. The second opening thought I want to make is leaders solve problems they didn't create. That is what leaders do. They solve problems they didn't create. The third opening point I want to make is there is an unwritten job description for leaders, right? Wherever you find yourself as a leader, your first job description is to ensure that everything works optimally and there are no problems. That's your first job description as a leader, to ensure that everything works optimally and there are no problems at all. Your second job description is to ensure that you solve those problems if they arise. Leaders solve problems. So wherever you find yourself as a leader, your first job is to ensure that everything is working perfectly well, optimally, and there are no problems. Now your second job description is to make sure that you solve those problems if they arise. And your final third job description is to ensure that those problems never occur again. So I've said three things now. As a leader, what's the first thing you do? Make sure everything is working perfectly well. The reason why we have plenty things not working in our system, whether you want to take it as the macro system as a nation or micro systems as your department or your community or your school, the reason why many things are not working is because there are people who have been put in place to be responsible to ensure that those things work, who are simply not doing their jobs as leaders in that little sphere where they have been placed. So your first job as a leader is to make sure everything works optimally as it is meant to work. Your second job is to make sure that if there are problems, those problems are solved immediately. And your third job is to make sure that those problems never occur again, right? So now, as we go into the first part of this course, which is identifying problems. Identifying problems. How do you identify problems? It is Albert Einstein that said, if I were given 1 hour to save the planet, I will spend 59 minutes defining the problem and 1 minute solving it. He said, if I were given 1 hour to save the planet, I'll spend 59 minutes defining the problem and 1 minute solving it. Now, why will Albert Einstein, make this type of statement? Because identifying the problem is far more important than solving it. In fact, you cannot solve a problem you haven't identified. You can't solve, forget about solving it. How can you hit a target you haven't seen? No. So you can't solve a problem you haven't identified. So identifying a problem is far more important than solving the problem. And that's why I want to see some steps here now in identifying problems. The first thing is you ask yourself, is it really a problem? Is it really a problem? Now, you see, this looks like a silly question when there is a situation at hand. But as silly as it sounds, is a very crucial question to ask. Is it really a problem? Because in the real sense, many people congratulate themselves for solving problems that never existed. Meaning, the problem never existed, but they solved the situation. Or what they had in their hands was not a problem, it was a situation. But if you don't ask yourself, is this really a problem? You will not realize that this is not a problem, it's simply a situation. And you'll be investing time and resources in a solution that was never a problem. I remember my brother-in-law was getting married. My sister-in-law, was getting married. And this is family wedding and everybody was right there in the church. And right in the middle of the wedding, when the officiating minister, the pastor, is joining the husband and the wife, suddenly a member of the family runs and comes out and calls me out, calls my mother-in-law out, calls my wife out. He calls key people in the family, calls us out of the church, and now says, there's a big problem. This is happening in the middle of somebody's wedding. Her daughter is getting married inside, and he has called the mother out, he has called the sister out, he has called me out, and called other people out. And he says, there's a big problem. He says, I went to the reception and I saw the way they arranged the hall. When they start serving food in that place, it will be a very serious problem. There will be a very serious problem because the way they arranged the hall, and we were staying out there, spending minutes. And suddenly I just told myself, whoa. We cannot be here trying to solve a problem that doesn't exist. I had to call off that meeting and we went back into the wedding. And of course, when we went for the reception, there was no problem. You see, many people, they solve situations, they don't solve problems, and they congratulate themselves for doing it. So the first question you must ask is it really a problem? And when you have clarified that it is actually a problem, the next question you ask is, what problem is it? You see, every problem must be clearly defined. You cannot deal with a problem that is vaguely defined. You cannot deal with a problem that hasn't been clearly defined. So, okay, yes, you have ascertained and you have clarified that this is a problem, right? So The next is, what problem is this? You must identify the problem. What problem is this? So when you ask yourself that question and you start brainstorming and investigating further, you will come up with answers. Notice that you're still trying to identify the problem. You have not started talking about solving it, but what problem is this? Right? So let's say, for instance, now you work in the civil service and they say, there's a situation on ground though. We notice that productivity has dropped in our ministry since we asked workers to start working from home. Right? So you ask yourself, okay, what problem is this? Is it a problem of productivity on the part of the workers? Is it a systemic problem based on monitoring of productivity and evaluation of work on the part of the department? You ask yourself these questions. What problem is this? You must clearly define the problem. And when you clearly define the problem, the next question is that you ask yourself how, or before you even go to that, let me give you this quiz. Look at this. And of course, many people who are in management circles would do this quiz. This is a very popular quiz in management circles. There was an elevator installed in an office complex, right? And you're the manager of this office complex. And people start complaining suddenly that, oh, the elevator is too slow. The elevator is too slow. The elevator is too slow. You have to fix the elevator. The elevator is too slow. Otherwise, they are not going to renew their rent in the office complex. How will you solve the problem? Now, these are different people who have different approaches to solving this problem. But eventually, right, and this was actually a real life situation, eventually, how this problem was solved when it occurred is that the manager of the facility put mirrors in the elevator. The manager of the facility put mirrors in the elevator, and all the complaints disappeared. There was no complaint again that the elevator was slow. Now, how did the manager of the facility arrive at this solution? The manager of the facility asked, wait, is there really a problem? And after researching, he said, okay, there's a problem. People are saying that the elevator is slow. He asked, so what really is the problem? Because the fact that they say the elevator is slow doesn't make a slow elevator to be the problem. He asked, what really is the problem? He said, we wait too long in the elevator. We have to wait too long in the elevator. And what's the problem with waiting too long? The problem with waiting too long is that I'm bored. I cannot be waiting just in an elevator for 2 minutes when I know I have something to do upstairs in my office. So he now saw that it's not really a problem with the speed of my elevator. It's a problem with people who are waiting and are bored in the process of waiting. So he installed mirrors in the elevator such that when people enter the elevator, they are going upstairs, they are going for an appointment, they are going to your office, they are checking their tie properly set, they are checking their suit, is their suit well adjusted, they are checking their headgears, they are checking everything. And even when the elevator door opens that they have arrived at their floor, they are not done checking, they are still trying to adjust the tie in the mirror. So suddenly, the elevator was becoming too fast for them because they didn't even have enough time to adjust their tie inside the elevator. So you ask yourself, what really is the problem? Otherwise, if that property manager did not ask that question to really clarify the problem, he'll have started thinking of replacing the elevator altogether, changing the elevator or changing the motto of the elevator, right? But he really identified what really is the problem. It's not the elevator that is the problem. And when he clarified that and identified that, he was able to now address the real problem. And then finally, you ask yourself, whose problem is it? In identifying the problem, you ask yourself, whose problem is it? Whose problem is it? Every problem must be owned. I will repeat that again. Every problem must be owned. You see, one of the issues we have in our country right now and in Africa is that there are many problems that are not owned by anybody. Every problem must be owned. Whose problem is this? You see, the reason why power problem is still power problem is because it hasn't been owned. The day somebody gets up and say, it is my problem, right? That person is one step closer to solving it. Whose problem is power problem? Let me ask you that. Whose problem is power problem now in Nigeria? That's when I say power, I mean NEPA, light problem. Whose problem is light problem in Nigeria? Whose problem is the problem of your roads? the roads in your community. Whose problem is that? Sorry, my network was quite unstable, so I had to make some adjustment on my settings. But I believe I'm back now. Leadtots, can you hear me? I had issues with my network, but Leadtots, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay, thank you. So whose problem is the road problem in your community? Whose problem is that? Whose problem is the water problem? Until a problem is owned, it will not be solved. Every problem must be, there are no orphan problems. That's problems that don't have owners. Whose problem is it? Whose problem is the, let me even ask you one that is close to everybody now. Whose problem is the COVID-19 problem? The COVID-19 situation. Whose problem is it? Do you know some months ago it was China's problem? About 10 months ago or 12 months ago. Do you know COVID-19 was China's problem? But suddenly ownership of the problem has changed. Every problem must be owned. That's the next thing. And then once the problem has been identified, right? The problem has been clarified and the problem has been owned, those three things, once those three things has done, then you are done with identifying the problem and you can now safely proceed to solving the problem. So now, solving problems. There are 3 default responses to solving problems that I want to share with us before we go into solving problems. Let me ask you a question. When you say a problem, what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you say a problem? When you say a problem, what's the first thing that comes to your mind? What's the first thing that comes to your mind? Now,
people are muted.
Yes, no, I don't expect audio responses.
Okay, they can respond in the chat.
These are either rhetorical questions or chat responsible questions. But I'm not expecting verbal feedback right now, right? So what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you see a problem? Now, there are 3 default responses that people do with problems, right? The first default response to problem is to ignore it. And this is the default response of many Nigerians, to ignore it. You see, I can tell your default response to problems by the time I look at how the road that leads to your house, the footpath, or the motorable road, when I look at it, how that leads to right to your gate, when I look at it, I can tell the default response to problems of the people who live on that street. I can tell their default response to problems. So when I see the road and I say that this is something that a few bags of sand can take care of, then I know that the default response to problems of the people living on this street is to ignore it. So the first default response to problems that people have is to ignore it. Another default response to problem that people have is to report it. Some people, immediately they encounter a problem, the first thing that comes in their mind is, hey, this is a problem, let me report it. That is the first thing that they think about. So you encounter a situation, you encounter a problem, hey, let me report this. You pick up your phone or you send an email or you call for a meeting. Is let me report it. Reporting is the default response of some people. I had a co-worker who I was his supervisor, right? And interestingly, we were living in the same facility. So I traveled for my wedding, right? And a few days to my wedding, maybe like 2 days to my wedding, where I am busy with all the plans of my wedding. And this young man who I am his supervisor suddenly sends me a message. He is in Abuja there. Me, I've traveled all the way to the west for my wedding. He sends me a lengthy text message. And what's the content of this message? He said he was now reporting situation, the problems he has encountered in the house where we are both staying as staff. He says, no light in bulbs outside, no water in tank, no gas in cylinder. This is how he expressed the situation. No tank, no gas in cylinder, no water in tank, no light in bulb. And I told myself, I said, I am right in the middle of preparing for my wedding. I'm 2 days to my wedding. I have a lot of things to handle. And the best this guy can do is to report problems as basic as this. Now, if I'm to do an appraisal for promotion, do you think that's the type of person who will get promoted in an organization? Who his default response to problems is to, and these are petty, very petty problems. His default response is to report it. As far as he's concerned, he has reported the problem. And of course, I replied him. I said, take 2,000 naira, buy water in tank. Take 4,000 naira, put gas in cylinder. Take 200 naira, buy bulb in light. I could not figure out how a leader would just report problems as basic as this. Now, let me tell you something. If your default approach to problems is reporting it, let me give you an advice. The first thing I'll tell you is never report a problem you haven't attempted solving. That's the first thing. Never report a problem you haven't attempted solving. As a leader, except you are just a follower, right? And I believe everybody in this class are leaders. So as a leader, never report a problem you haven't attempted solving. The next thing is never report a problem without proposing a plan to address it. Never report a problem. Once you are reporting a problem, make sure that you are proposing a plan to address that problem at the same time. So your report of the problem is also coming with a proposal for solution without proposing a plan on solving it, right? And the third default response to problem that people have is to solve it. And this is the leader's mindset. This is where I want us to get to. This is the leader's mindset. The leader's default response to problem is to solve it. As far as I'm concerned, there is nothing else you can do with problems than solve them. For me, that is my own personal conviction. I don't have any other use. Or do you have another use for problems? Maybe if you have another use for problems, people can start bringing their problems to you. But as far as I'm concerned, I only have one use for problems, and that is to solve them. I don't have a second use for them. I don't know any other thing I can do with them. Right? So the default response of leaders is to solve problems. And that now brings us to solving problems. Remember, I've seen identifying problems. So now solving problems using the what, why, how approach. Solving problems using the what, why, how approach. And this is just, now there are different problem solving models, right? And this is just a model that I put together because I found this very helpful. So there are different ones, but I want to stick with this, and it's something that our time will allow us to explore. The what, why, and how approach, right? Now, solving problems, you ask what. So, and it's good to keep asking this what question. You know, when you keep asking this what question, remember you asked it before, what problem really is this? Sometimes you might be dealing with evolving problems, meaning the problem is evolving, the problem is changing. And the more frequently you ask what, you keep track of these changes. You know, in fact, I believe right now the pandemic is an evolving problem, right? Because when they say, hey, we found vaccines and everything, suddenly they say, okay, we have a new strain of the virus has emerged, and we are not yet sure whether the vaccines we developed can act against it. We did our testing against the other virus, against the other strain of the virus. You know, it's an evolving problem. So sometimes in different situations, you might be dealing with an evolving problem. So you ask yourself, what problem is this, right? So what will reveal the problem? The next thing you ask yourself is, why? Why is this a problem? Why is this a problem? Right? So why we actually reveal the cause of the problem. When you ask yourself why, whereas what we reveal what the problem is, right? Why we reveal the cause. So why did this problem come up in the first place? Why did this problem come up in the first place? Why do we have a pandemic in our hands in the first place? Why is our roads like this in the first place? Why can't we deal? Why is there power? Why is there power for only 4 hours a day in the first place? Is there a problem with Kianji Dam? Is it a dam problem? What's the cause? Why is it like this? Why is the road around your church? Why is it like that? Why is the road around your mosque? Why is it like that? So when you ask why, you are dealing with the cause. And after you ask why, then you ask how. How can we solve this problem? How can we deal with this problem? How can we address this problem? How can we? That is when you now start dealing with the methodology, the solution. How can we address it? How can we solve it? How can we put an end to it? So you start bringing up solutions, you start brainstorming, you put your team together, you ask yourself, what's the most efficient way? How can I address this? How can this be tackled? So when you use the what question to reveal the real state of the problem, the why question to reveal the real cause of the problem. And I will advise maybe you can do some further study on your own in root cause analysis, right? That's a different branch on its own. But you ask the why question to reveal the root cause of the problem. I now ask the how question to track and develop a solution for the problem. So now, some closing thoughts before we finally tie things up. One, the problem is not solved when a solution is found. The problem is solved when the cause is removed. The problem is not solved when a solution is found. The problem is solved when the cause is removed. That's when the problem is solved. So people rejoice when the solution is found and when they don't see the problem. You see, the symptoms are what some people rejoice because the symptoms have disappeared, but the cause is still there. You can see the diagram I have on the screen. You can see causes are the roots, right? The problem is actually the trunk that is right above the root. And then the leaves are the symptoms. So what some people do is that they deal with the leaves. The problem is still there. Some people, they deal with the leaves and they deal with the tree trunk. They deal with the trunk. That's the symptoms and the problem. But the root is still there. The cause is still there. So the problem is not solved when a solution is found. The problem is solved when the cause is removed. I remember there was a time I was constantly having a flat tire, right? So I had this flat tire. I drive over to the vulcanizer. I get some air. And 2 days later, again, the tire is going down. I'm driving to work. I stop over the vulcanizer, get some air. 2 days time, the tire is going down. As I'm driving to work, I stop over. Now, have I solved my flat tire problem simply because I'm still driving my car around and the car hasn't stopped me? No. Until I now asked myself, whoa, what is the cause? What is the cause? And it turned out that there is something they also have put around the rim of the tire in order to keep air from leaking that wasn't properly done. And until that was done, the cause was taken care of. That is when the problem was solved, right? So the problem is not solved when the solution is found. It's solved when the cause is removed. Next closing thought is you should, as a leader, always develop a reoccurrence reduction measure, right? Make sure you develop reoccurrence reduction measures. Reoccurrence reduction measures, meaning you build systems. Apart from solving a problem, you see, leaders don't go to sleep after solving a problem. The next thing leaders do after solving a problem is that they build systems that will ensure that the reoccurrence possibility of that problem is as close to zero as possible. They will build systems within the organization, build systems within their community, build systems within their families, build systems within their personal lives to ensure that the reoccurrence probability of that problem is reduced to zero if possible. So you must develop reoccurrence reduction measures after solving a problem. And the third thing I'll tell you is don't rely on committees. As a leader, you'll be occupying different offices in the future, right? And some of you are already occupying some public offices now. When you want to really get the solution to a problem, my advice to you is don't rely on committees. When you see, I checked up the dictionary definition of committee when I was preparing my notes. And interestingly, in the dictionary I checked up, they now put a quotation there after defining what a committee is. They put a quotation there as an illustration of how the word committee can be used in a sentence. And you know the quotation they put there? They said, a committee is a group of people that keep minutes and waste hours. A committee is a group of people that keep minutes and waste hours. Don't rely on committees. Committees generate more minutes than solutions. If what you're looking for is minutes of meetings, then you can set up committee. If what you're looking for solution, don't rely on committees. Committees will generate minutes and memos, not solution. What you should do is to rely on teams. You should build a team, not a committee. Actually, in the real sense, a committee is actually a group of people brought together to look into a matter. That is what a committee is. Is that what you're looking for? Are you looking for people who look into a matter? You're looking for people who come up with a solution, who will solve a matter, not look into it. So rather than commission a committee, right? Build a team, commission a team, set up a team where each person has 100% responsibility for a particular fraction of the solution. That is how you get problem solved when you're dealing with people. Set up a team where each person has 100% responsibility for a particular aspect of the solution. 100% responsibility for a particular aspect of the entire solution, for a particular corner of the solution. Each person has 100% responsibility for a particular corner of the solution, a particular aspect of the solution. So don't rely on committees, rather build teams, rely on teams. So finally now, you would have in the portal, there's a quiz that you take in the portal, and part of the quiz is this, right? It has been noticed that members of your community have not been keeping to the COVID-19 guidelines in spite of all efforts to enforce compliance. You have just been appointed community leader, and this is the first matter on your desk. Using the problem-solving model taught in this module, right? Address the situation. How will you address the situation? So thank you very much, young men and women. I believe one day you would actually find yourself in a situation, in a position, and in offices where matters as serious as this will actually be resting on your desk. Now it's just an assignment, but one day you actually find yourself in real life situations where matters as serious as this will be resting on your desk, and the onus will be on you to solve it. And it is my hope and my earnest desire that you will not fail us, you will not fail Leadtots, you will not fail this academy, and above all, you will not fail yourself and your community and the people who have trusted you with the office that has been given to you. Thank you very much and have a very wonderful day.